That's
Good
right.
to see you.
Hey, Terry.
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Long time no see.
No kidding.
You got your whole gang
Hey,
here.
go to you. The gang's all here. I'm telling you, I used to tell that to
All my sinuses. Yeah, that's what I mean.
$2 for $12. Exercise.
Oh, really? Yeah. What's your deal?
Over here to the
It's been weeds and just popping up everywhere. I laid down pretty
this way.
Yeah, oh, I
People were out by
yeah, and we didn't do anything. Shut up. I had rocks and stuff up behind it.
My wife got evacuated out of People's Valley, so she came down through Yarmouth.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Spread it. Do it twice a year.
When she got down here, that's where I moved over here to Glen Island. I said, go over to Glen Island, stay at their house, because the fire was going that way.
Yeah, when's
Yeah,
that?
we're done now.
Chased her all the way down the hill.
Anything.
Well, we had some snow. Yeah,
But not enough.
not enough. Ready? Got my own table.
Nancy, hi. Good to see you. Kelly, who all do we have on the phone?
Crap, I need a pen. I always forget a damn pen. Shit, that back here.
I thought you said John got on. Was John on or not? Something? He didn't.
John had something he wrote this morning.
Okay, all right. So you want to just check to make sure we have it.
Has anyone else joined? I know we have Debbie, remember Johnson?
I thought we were getting away from printing. Because
Oh, okay, thank you.
we were getting away from this.
So we have Debbie and then the three of us. Okay.
So before Chief Task Force was making checks now, it's taking a while to get there.
Yeah, because we said we were going to...
I'd like to call the meeting of the Arizona State Parks Board to order. First of all, thank you, Bob, and to your staff for hosting an actual in-person meeting. It's been since February of 2020
Yep.
that we were last together. We've obviously conducted our business in great fashion since and on the virtual modality. But being here in your office is a real
nice.
honor again to be back here with your staff. And I'd just like to thank you and your staff for maintaining the excellence throughout all of these months and the business of the board and everything else. So really appreciate that very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that in mind, I would like to ask our newest board member, Jeff Buchanan, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jeff. Just like to remind everyone, and for the record, we are following normal CDC protocols with this meeting. Separate, we all have masks. I would ask, though, especially when our speakers come up to the podium, if you're comfortable, please remove your mask so that we can fully understand and it's recorded properly. And even as board members and staff, if you want to take your mask off when you're speaking, that's perfectly well. Thank you for the guests that are here for the meeting, and I guess with that, we will have a member roll call.
Dale Larson,
Here.
John Sutton, Lisa Atkins,
It's a delay. Lisa, are you on?
Guess not, okay.
Jeff Buchanan,
Here.
Debbie Johnson. Here. Terry Tomberg.
Here.
All right, very good. And thank you, Debbie. Thank you for joining us via the phone. And as I said when I was doing my introductions, our newest member is Jeff Buchanan. He's a new member in person, a veteran member in sense of it. But Jeff, why don't you just quickly reintroduce yourself and let us know your background, since we now can see each other in face-to-face, and your support and honor of wanting to be on the board.
Sure. Thanks, Dale. I'm Jeff Buchanan. I live on a small ranch outside of Patagonia, Arizona, and my wife and I are both from Arizona, both University of Arizona grads. I thought I'd throw that in for you.
Here we're all neutral. We're all
I spent 37 years in the Army and traveled all over the world and did all kinds of interesting things, but retired in 2019 and decided, first of all, that we wanted to come home, and secondly, we wanted to continue to serve, and thirdly, both of our bachelor's degrees are in wildlife ecology, so we wanted to be engaged in the outdoors, and this is a great opportunity to do just that.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for coming back. And I see U of A hired a new basketball coach, so
That's right.
hopefully that'll be encouraging for what's going on. I would like for the record just to be able to state our mission statement. We do this before the meeting at each time. I think mission statements not only are just statements on black and white, but they actually are the driving philosophy, the driving action of why we serve. As board members, we are gathered today to be the stewards and the voice of the Arizona State Parks, and its mission statement is to manage and conserve Arizona's natural, cultural, and recreation resources for the benefit of the people, both in our parks and through our partners. So with that, let's get on to the agenda. Approval of the minutes, item D1. Board members had an opportunity to review the minutes from March 18, 2021. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the meeting minutes from March 18th, 2021, with the understanding they had that correction made prior to the hard copy here.
Nancy, were you able to not Nancy, Kelly, were you able to capture that then in the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, very good. A motion is on the floor to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second the motion.
Motion seconded by Board Member Buchanan. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Debbie. Motion carries. All right, going now to, we are really honored today to have a presentation that has been a long time coming, and very appreciative that we're able to do this in person. This is the Yarnell Hill Fire Memorial Park update. Francis Lechner, President, and the Yarnell Regional Community Center Board Member will be coming to do this. Francis, if you would join us at the lectern to be able to do it. In my getting to meet you for the first time, I had mentioned to you that I had the honor and the privilege of serving on the Arizona Memorial Firefighters and Paramedics Board back in 2015-16 with Rick DeGraw, and the memorial that's on the Wesley Boland Plaza, and the work that is done statewide on behalf of firefighters in general, but what you've done with Yarnell, and we have a board member here who is one of your favorite supporters on it. We're just so pleased to have you here and to tell us on the update leading up to what's going to happen in June.
Thank you very much, Chairman Larson, and thank you everybody for having us here. We are honored to be here at the Reawakening Maiden Voyage for this year for the board meetings, the in-person board meeting. I serve as president of the Yarnell Area Resource Group. This was the new name for the Yarnell Hill Recovery Group, and the YHRG was the group that led the recovery efforts, dispersing over $2 million in the wake of the fire. When the work was pretty well finished, we recognized we had an entity in place, we had a 501c3 status. Why let that organization just disintegrate? So we just shifted to Yarnell Area Resource Group with the mission of collaborating for sustainable communities in the Weaver Mountains. So that's kind of just those names. I do serve also on the Yarnell Regional Community Center Board, but that's not my role today. So with me today is Chuck Tidy. Chuck was the president of the Yarnell Hill Recovery Group during the rigorous 6 years, my math is not my strong suit. And it was Chuck's vision that has driven a whole lot of the activity in the park. He was one of the few people that did not evacuate during the fire, so he was a little reality check. No, the community center didn't burn. Yes, your house is still there. So he stayed in touch with people during the course of the fire. With us also was Bob Brandon. Bob was one of the firefighters in the fire. He oversaw the direction of the building of homes for the underinsured or the uninsured after the fire. He's an artist. You'll see some of his work a little bit later. And he and Chuck have shared in these last several months the work of finishing the park. So just a little bit of just a little bit of explanation of who we are. my plan is I'm just going to make a few introductory remarks, then Chuck is going to say a few things. We'll do a brief slideshow because a picture is worth 1,000 words. In this case, they're going to be 2,000. I'm not going to do any commentary. It'll just be a lot of cameo shots of the building of the park. Then a few more details afterwards, and we want to open it to Q&A because we don't want to overwhelm you. We're like grandparents, you know. You can talk about your grandkids for years, so we could inundate you with details. So I guess I want to say two things, and one is this really has been a labor of love. There's a heart in our logo, and it's there for a good reason. It was love of the firefighters that drove a whole lot of the donations to us. It was love for our community. It was love for our neighbors, helping each other out. It has permeated, including this work. You know the joke about what is a camel? It's a horse that was designed by a committee. Well, this park was designed by a committee, and I'm happy to report, I'm biased of course, but I think what we've designed is a Pegasus. It's a beautiful park, and despite the challenges we had, the aesthetic differences, and are you crazy? You know, we can't afford this. I mean, imagine it's been 8 years of trying to figure out the best way not only to honor the hotshots, but to reflect what happened to our community. So Chuck will give you more details about that when he speaks. I'm happy to report that we did our soft opening on April 2nd, which simply means that we left the gates open. On Sunday, Easter Sunday, April 4th, we had an Easter or sunrise service sponsored by the 3 local churches. We had about 50 people attending at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning. It's a beautiful morning. And since that day, we've already had 127 signatures on our guest book. And it's a little spooky to me. I was just telling Chuck, 127 is the number of homes that burned in the fire. So to have that 127, and that happens a lot. There's little synchronicity things that happen. So with that, I'm going to let Chuck tell you a little bit more about some details. Do you want to take the microphone down?
I probably speak loud enough. So people
Gotta
on
go
internet
on the
probably
mic.
can't.
Can you pull the mic off the, yeah, thanks, appreciate that.
Oh,
And welcome Chuck and welcome Bob for coming along and being the support with Francis, really appreciate it.
As typical, I'm more trouble than I'm worth. I apologize. I've had 3 vertebrae fused.
Well, thank you for coming. This is great.
It's only been 50 years in coming. But, yeah, a little background on myself that Francis didn't say was I was on the state board that put together the Granite Mountain Hotshot Memorial. And so I have a little more background than most people on what went into that and why and everything else. One of the things that park does is it just recognizes the Granite Mountain Hotshot team. And that's not the whole story. As Francis said, we lost 127 homes. And that's 127 families. But, I did meet a lot of people up there when I stayed after the fire. They were all sheriffs. And they escorted me down. But they got used to it. The reason I wanted to build this park was to recognize the whole story. It wasn't just the tragic. Well, it's all tragic. It also involved the town people and what they faced when they came back. And we formed the recovery group 5 of us, and leaders of the town. And I was the face. I went out every day for about 12 hours and answered questions that I could for the residents when they came back, and went through that. So that's why I thought about putting the park in town, so that their story. And this map here, you can see all the red are parcels that burnt. They had homes on them, and the hard thing to realize is they burnt on Sunday afternoon. It wasn't like, all week or anything else. I went through with the constables on Monday morning, and those that have ever seen movies or anything else, it looked like it had been bombed out. And so that's why we wanted to build a park that would tell the story, so people can realize. Everybody says, oh, I didn't know you lost that many homes. And well, no, because the story was the 19th. Yeah, the other thing is, having been on the state board, we realize not everybody can make the hike out to the fatality site. And so we wanted to have a place where people, parents, grandparents could go and see the guys. We've got a picture up there later. We have a 9-foot tall photo etched stainless steel. Yeah, it'll be in the slideshow, but yeah, sorry, slideshow. That was, and we photoshopped all 20 of them in there. The original picture only had 17. Identified the 3 missing, went to the parents and got their approval to include them. Because we wanted to remember them before. We've got the other part to remember what happened. So. And that's basically what our theme at the park in town, the Yarnell Hill Fire Memorial Park. Those that don't know, the building that is a 2-story bathroom and maintenance storage was designed for us by the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architects. They charged us $1,000. No, that was good. I'm also working with a fireman out of Peoria that does videos, and we're going to try to put together a 10-minute video that will be on display at the park of the hike. So it'll start at the trailhead, stop at each of the plaques, and go up to the overlook and do that, and then go down, just so people that can't make the hike can see what it's about. And felt that was important to them. The parents and grandparents have been to the site over the years, but they go in the back way and are driven in. And that's just not happening as much because the helms are getting tired. And that's pretty much what I got.
Thank you.
So if we could go ahead and start the slideshow?
All right, very good, thank you.
Yep. Oh, okay.
Francis, how tall is that wall right there that we're showing the footings going in?
The wall goes to 10 feet at the highest point.
Just another comment, as we have the ability to watch it, and those online don't have that ability right now. The lot that was purchased for this park development was a significant challenge in itself, as it had a very steep slope from the 89 roadway and sidewalk that dropped significantly off into a more flattened base, but never really flattened out because it kind of sloped the whole way. So it has been a challenge to create an environment that was usable.
Oh, wow. That's the slope there. That's the slope, yeah. There we are.
Actually, if you want to hold that just for a second here, I'll point out.
Chris McKenzie was the one taking the picture that day, so he needed to be photoshopped in. Joe Person was at a wedding, and Eric Marsh was not well that day. You can see they stand out more in color, so that you'll notice when we do the black and white image, they blend much more effectively.
Oh, very nice.
Another point of interest, I think, is the fact that people regularly drop memorial items at the site, both up top on the observation deck, and now that it's open, they regularly place items at the base of the sculpture.
There's a new one that just came in the other day. It's a little rock that says love on it. It's just put right on top of some of the other boulders.
Very nice. That's great. Francis, that's wonderful. It really is. Thank you so much, and Chuck and Bob for accompanying this. You mentioned earlier on it was a labor of love.
Yes, very much so. Chuck has a few more details,
sure.
and then we'll open up for questions and answers if there are any.
Fine.
It took a lot longer than that shows. People generally want to know what it cost. Roughly $400,000 is what we've spent on. We bought the land from people. They discounted it down. Just about everybody discounted things for us, and so we it just tried to keep everything. That's why we used rebar on the fence, and people have come by and said, "Who did that for you?" Because I like it. And so now we're setting a trend. And the money, we had money donated for the recovery. The money used on the park was donated strictly for the park. Money that came in that was for helping the families was designated differently and treated totally separate. So the only money to build that park was money donated for that. And
I gotta get my glasses.
I think that's it for you.
okay, yep.
Okay, thank you.
So I used to teach junior high kids, right? So show and tell is really important. So I just wanted to point out a few things to you. Besides the map back here, which we've made a point to have at a couple of our other, presentations or when we have events, so people get an idea of the scope. The little yellow dots represent the houses that have been rebuilt. It actually needs to be updated. There are more of them now, but it does give you an idea of the impact largely in the Glen Isla area. I mentioned Bob was an artist. Bob did this magnificent painting of help me remember the name, Bob. This is the Lookout, that one I got, Wildland Firefighter. In any case, this is some of Bob's work. We sold them either as prints or in frames as fundraising efforts. And we also sell the t-shirts with a small logo in the front. I have to say that it was going to one of the state parks that inspired me to do this logo. I saw one of the logos, I think it was the Kartner Caverns. I thought, that's really cool. It says it all. And that's what inspired me to move it with that one. Gecko, could I ask you to hand me that for a second? This is just a close-up of one of the, I think this is Grant McKee, one of the hot shots. And it gives you an idea of what the big sculpture looks like. It's not really a sculpture, but it's easier sometimes to call it that. And I just thought you'd appreciate seeing the detail work on that. This is in stainless, so it'll last long after we're all gone. So that's pretty much it for the show and tell. I do have a brochure about the park for each of the board members. It also is an order for a brick. I didn't want it to look like I was doing a heavy sales job here, but of course, if you'd like to buy a brick, we'd love to have you. You have until May 31st to order a brick, and then that's all what we'll do. So now we're happy to take some questions and do some questions and answers if you'd like.
Well, do you want to mention what's coming up in June?
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Larson. June 30th, every year since the fire, we've done a memorial service, or we call it a remembrance event, because it isn't only to commemorate the loss of the 19 hotshots, but to recognize the loss throughout the community. We've had residents talk about what their lives have been like since the fire, what they've been experiencing. We have music, we have poetry. We've had some of the cadets read Eric Marsh's letter that explained what the hotshots were, so it's been changes every year. This year it will be the formal dedication of the park, Wednesday, June 30th, 4 o'clock. It's hot, but that's when the hotshots were out there fighting the fire, and we do it that way so that at 4:40, which is when it's estimated that they did pass away, we have a moment of silence. So this June 30th will be really special. And we'd like to extend the invitation to each of you individually. Bring up your families if you'd like. I know it's a weekday, but if you can shift some things around so you can join us, it would be great. So thank you for the reminder, Chairman Larson.
Oh, no, you're very welcome. Thank you, Fred. So, board members, any questions? I know Board Member Palmberg has been really our liaison to this because she's a neighbor and everything else. Do you have any comments yourself that you'd like to make?
Only, and I know we haven't tracked this, but do we have any kind of estimate on the number of volunteer hours? Because if you were to build this park with paid labor, it would be $1 million facility.
Easily. Terry, I don't think we did track it. We were doing some of that at the beginning during the recovery process, but for the park, no.
Okay. Other questions? Bob, do you want, on behalf of staff, any comments that you'd like to make, since this is the good neighbor to the monument itself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman, and Francis and Chuck, for your presentation. And for those of you who have not been up there, the only thing I can really relate visitation and not just talking to the folks is when I went to Pearl Harbor. It's very similar to that experience. We're glad. The guy standing behind me, Gecko, I can't even tell you how many hours he spent up there on his own time, his own dime, to go up there. He can be a lot more eloquent on this than I can. But one of the things that when we started talking about them building this memorial, we threw a few $1,000s their way to help them get over the hump. But also with long-term management of the memorial park, as well as our entrance to the trail. And that's something that we continue to talk about, and that will certainly come back to the board for you all to approve. If this is a takeover or acquisition, or if there's some co-management sort of scenario, that we need to do our diligence to bring this to you guys to let you know exactly what this would entail. We've got a one staff member up there. He finally got shade structure to live under during the heat. He loves his job, and he's great at his job. But I think there's a real opportunity here for us to work with the town and work with them, not without them, because they've been instrumental. That would be, yikes. Okay, I'm done now, I guess. But certainly to carry on the purpose of this memorial park, as well as the trail, and they give visitors an opportunity to buy passes, to be shuttled down to the area, because the parking, if you've been up there, the parking's limited, but it's a little dangerous too. We've got that shuttle that's running back and forth from town. So I think there's some real opportunity here for us to help out in a way that pays tribute to the work that's been done, the tragedies, all of the tragedies that are up there. And we'll be having that conversation with Francis and Chuck here over, and then when we think we've got it ready, we'll bring something back to you all, because you all will have to approve that. So we'll make sure we do our diligence in bringing that back. So I will be up there on the 30th. It was 2 years ago. We went up there. Yes, it was hot, but boy, what an experience. If you all can fit that in your calendars, we can shuttle you, meet here and shuttle up if that would work. But it's definitely, I can't wait to see it being done. When I saw it, it was piles of blocks and dirt, and Chuck and his vision trying to paint the picture. There was no fence, there was no wall, there was that steep slope there. The building was just about done, but really neat place, and we're really honored to have you all here to present that. And I think for my view, if we do take over the Memorial Park and manage it, we will manage it in a way that's respectful, that pays tribute. And it also is a very big educational component of this too, so we don't forget.
Thank you. Board Member Buchanan.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question about the painting that was raised but not talked about. Bob, is that one of yours as well?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
I do a lot of paintings of firefighters. It's one of my main things that I like to do. And that's a group of hotshots coming out, exhausted, wore out, and that is hanging in Governor Ducey's office.
Yeah.
I donated that to him at a prayer breakfast a couple of years ago. But firefighters are my first love, and I do a lot of them. I donate all the proceeds or whatever come off of them. I just gave it to the park to let them take copies.
You mentioned the other one has prints. Does that one have prints too? The one of the crew?
I have some with me. Just saying. We learn to beg like the professionals.
Angels coming up over the top of Brindley, sitting on a rock.
I have that one.
And that one I gave to Eric Marshall's wife. I gave her the original, but she gave us the rights to make copies.
Well, yeah, go ahead,
Mr. Chair,
Board
just
Member
another
Terry.
quick note. I got to tell you that Frances is something too, because during this time she also created with a close friend the Jonathan Henry Hummingbird book that's geared toward children and talking about families and raising hummingbird babies.
Oh, wow.
Very good. Well, again, on behalf of the board and our guests that are following, I know board member Debbie Johnson is on the line. Debbie, as you may not know, is the Arizona Office of Tourism Director as well. And in spite of the limitations of access and parking and the like, economic development is a big part, I'm sure, of Yarnell's wish to recover from all of this. So this Memorial Park, as well as the monument, will become an attraction for that. And it's something that I'm sure Bob and his staff will need to plan in the future for if there is an increase in visitation and accessibility and the like. So it's
We did feel that that was one of the best ways to honor the hot shots, for us to do everything we could to make Yarnell a thriving, vibrant community. So their sacrifice wasn't for nothing. So that's part of our vision too.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And the only other comment I make, again, to Chuck, and thank you very much for your stewardship. That's part of our mission. It's part of your mission with it too. But you probably don't know this technically. Terry does, probably Bob and his staff. But that video that you're doing that will allow for people that can't make the hike down is actually required under the ADA law for people that can't have that right of access. So you're actually complying with a federal law for that video. So without even knowing that, you've gone ahead and done it, and I appreciate that on behalf of anyone who has mobility issues that won't be able to do it, to see that video. That is just thumbs up all the way. So thank you for having the foresight to be able to do that up front.
Thank you. Thank you
Are there
very
any
much.
other questions or comments? If not, again, thank you for making the trip down here. Appreciate it very much, and we look forward to seeing you on June 30th.
Thank you.
Give the rest of the board, I think there's...
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, well, for those of you on the phone, you didn't have the opportunity to see these wonderful pictures. I know that they're part of our packet, but I think it's something that Bob and his staff can maybe put it even on our website for people to be able to see that, because there's some just great construction in progress pictures that we were able to take a look at right now. Okay, let's go on now to item D3, Arizona Trail Fund and awarded grants. Mickey and Matt, another Matt, I should say.
That's okay. Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name's Mickey Rogers. I'm the Chief of Grants and Trails for Arizona State Parks, and it's great to see everyone and finally see Member Buchanan, who has been virtual since he's been on the board. So I'm going to talk about the appropriations and the money we've given to the Arizona Trail, and Matt Nelson, who is on the phone, is going to start the meeting off about some of the history of the Arizona Trail and some of the accomplishments on the trail. So Matt, if you'd like to start the meeting.
Great, thank you so much, Mickey, and all members of the Arizona State Parks Board. Although I can't join you in person today, I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of information and passion about the Arizona State Scenic Trail, which is also the National Scenic Trail. Most anybody who's ever been involved with parks and trails within the state of Arizona is probably somewhat familiar with the Arizona Trail. But just a very brief 35-year history condensed in 11 minutes or so is that this trail was really born from the idea of one individual in the early 1980s, like that area school teacher, who traveled throughout Arizona and spent a lot of time on trails, a lot of time walking overland, and really had a vision of a trail that would connect mountains and canyons and forests and communities. And then looking at the amount of public land that existed in the state of Arizona, why not? Yes, the Appalachian Trail exists through the northeast, and the Pacific Crest Trail exists in the west. And we have the most biodiverse state in America. We should have a trail that traverses all these amazing areas. So that idea was brought to state parks, it was brought to the Forest Service with Bureau of Land Management, and to anybody who would listen, and it gained a lot of momentum in the very early days. And then fast forward a decade, state parks really took the lead in the development of this concept of a cross-state trail. Existing pieces of trail were utilized and connected with new trail construction in order roads to be able to create this 800-mile path through the entire state. But it became obvious pretty early on that given the number of different municipalities, land managers, everybody that was involved with this project, that in order for it to be successful and to have sustainability, that a nonprofit organization would need to be formed to really kind of help take the lead in terms of volunteer recruitment and overall management. So the Arizona Trail Association was born 27 years ago, and since that time, we've been dedicated to the building, maintenance, protection, promotion of the Arizona Trail. It became, and it's still considered, the largest volunteer service project in the history of the state of Arizona. That's because every year, thousands of trail stewards, thousands of volunteers, youth groups and hiking groups and Boy Scouts and conservation corps contribute to the construction and maintenance of the trail. On average, there's about 25,000 volunteer hours that are contributed annually. Last year, because of COVID and our reduction in the number of events we hosted in person, that number went down. We saw about a 30% reduction in 2020, but we'll more than make up for it this year in 2021. Fast forward a few more years, when we got to the year of 2006 is when the state legislature designated the Arizona Trail a state scenic trail, the first of its kind. 3 years later, it was designated by Congress as a national scenic trail. So today, the Arizona National Scenic Trail, which we just call the Arizona Trail, is one of only 11 national scenic trails in all of America. It has that special congressional designation, which is really pretty fantastic. Our organization is made up of about 15 staff and a few thousand volunteers who contribute to the construction, maintenance, and protection of the trail annually. Most people know about the trail because of its recreational resources, and one of the things that makes it unique is that it's open to all forms of non-motorized recreation. So primarily that's hiking and running and backpacking, mountain biking, outside designated wilderness areas, and horseback riding. We build and maintain these trails to those standards so that it's safe and accessible for horseback riders, mountain bikers, as well as pedestrians. It's an amazing project and incredible group to work with. And one of our biggest challenges, I would say, is large-scale landscape management, because this trail passes through 4 national forests, 11 ranger districts, 2 BLM units, Arizona state parks, Arizona state land, and some private parcels as well. There are 3 National Park Service units that would also pass through different parts of the state. And of course, with all these different land management agencies with different priorities and land management kind of guidelines, what we try to do is find consistent management across all these boundaries. But more than anything, engaging individuals in the enjoyment and also the maintenance and protection of the trail. While we're known for the Arizona Trail as its recreation resources, it provides so much more. It's an economic engine to Arizona's rural communities. We've identified and designated 32 different gateway communities that the Arizona Trail either passes through or passes near, almost all of which are rural. If you look at the map that Nikki probably has up on the screen, you'll see that when the trail was initially developed, the goal was to avoid all major metro areas. This is supposed to be a wild, scenic experience for people to experience kind of the wild heart of Arizona. So a lot of these small towns like Patagonia and Kern, the biggest town probably being Flagstaff, are really supported by this thoroughfare of people that are out hiking, mountain biking, horseback riding, either for a day or for a weekend or for all the 100 miles. Knowing that long-term sustainability really exists only with our community members and the number of people we can engage in the enjoyment and protection of the trail, we've done a lot of outreach efforts over the past decade as the organization's executive director. We have a very robust volunteer program, which Nikki will talk about a little bit more through some of the grants that have come through recently. But also our youth engagement projects are really impressive. We engage on average about 2,000 young people every year in the direct enjoyment of the trail. So it's a program called Student Stewardship, where we take youth from these Arizona Trail gateway communities out on the trail repeatedly at no cost to the participants. We work with local schools to focus on a 3-tiered model of experience, education, and stewardship so that youth get repeat exposure to the trail and trail experiences. That includes being out on the trail and enjoying it, working with teachers to integrate the existing curriculum into on-the-trail activities, and then also getting their hands dirty, actually doing trail maintenance, so they feel direct ownership and stewardship of the trail. We also recognize that Arizona has a very large veterans community, and returning from combat and We also know that wildlife is an incredibly important part of Arizona's natural resources as well as the Arizona Trail experience. So for the past 2.5 years, we've undertaken a wildlife monitoring effort that is part of a 5-year effort where we have essentially camera traps along the entire length of the Arizona Trail. And what we're attempting to do is to monitor 2 things. One would be recreational use, because we don't really know, because there's no permit system, how many people are using the trail. So cameras will tell us not only how many people are using the trail, but how they're using the trail. Are they hiking? Are they backpacking? Are they running? Are they riding horses or mules, etc.? We also want to look at which wildlife are using the trail, because what we know is that large cats and other species prefer to use trails or washes over walking overland. So the trail itself can actually be a beneficial resource to wildlife. So after this 5-year study is complete, we want to be able to analyze what are the impacts of recreation on wildlife corridors. Are recreational trails beneficial for wildlife? And then also, what is the type and frequency used along the trail? I'll be able to answer questions after Nikki kind of talk a little bit about some of the projects we've done most recently. But we're a very active and engaged organization. We work a lot with Arizona State Parks and Trails on a variety of things, as well as the Arizona Office of Tourism, who's been a really wonderful partner over the past few years in printing maps. Also, we did an incredible engagement campaign at the end of last year with funding from the governor, specifically to promote Arizona's gateway communities and how the trail helps connect. And that online media campaign reached over 2 million people, which was really pretty impressive, both within the state of Arizona and outside it. But it's an honor to work for this nonprofit organization. It's an absolute honor to work with agencies like Arizona State Parks and Trails, our members like yourselves, who are really committed to the state as natural and cultural resources, and using the trail as kind of a pathway to connect with people, to connect with landscapes, and to kind of dig deeper into what makes Arizona so special. That's all I have for right now, and we'll do questions after the presentation.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate that. Mickey?
Thank you, Matt. So as you know, the 800-mile trail would take a lot of money to maintain the trail. That's where we can certainly help with that. The Arizona Trail Fund was established, Statute 41-511-15, by the legislature to appropriate money for the Arizona Trail, and the funding would be coming to State Park. We would work with the Arizona Trail Association, come up with a priority list. They would select these lists. We would send a ship of approval, and then they would hire AmeriCorps crews to do the work on these trails. So this was established in 2007 when they got the first funding for that. However, in 2009, the funding was rescinded, but it was reestablished in 2016. So in 2016, there was $150,000 set aside for the Arizona Trail Fund, and Arizona Trail worked and did some projects near Oracle State Park. The trail goes right through Oracle State Park. They did some projects in 2016 on that. In 2020, there was a $250,000 appropriation that we established, and we worked with the Arizona Trail Association to fund these trails on trail work throughout the state. So the list that's on the sheet is the funding that's been established since 2013. There are 2 appropriations for the Arizona Trail Fund. The Arizona Trail has received 2 non-motorized trail grants, 2 trail maintenance grants, and also there are 8 other agencies that have funded projects along the Arizona Trail. So they collaborate with Forest Service, nonprofits to do continued maintenance on trails on their property also. So this is a map that shows the trails.
Might just point out that you got a beautiful banner
Yes.
right up here on the wall.
So this,
It's a pretty good visual of the entire.
it's a little bit better than the one on the TV screen. But if you see the blue dots of projects funded with the Arizona Trail Fund, the RTP grants to the Arizona Trail Association are designated in green, and the other agencies are designated with red, I believe. So I'm going to go through a couple of projects that were funded. This is the historic Colonel Devens Trail. They built 2 footbridges and they rerouted 1.1 mile, they improved 1.1 mile of trails. This was a 2017 project, and as with the majority of state park ATA-funded projects, the Arizona Trail Association uses Youth Corps for much of their work. Having managed the AmeriCorps program in Maine for several years, if you don't know anything about AmeriCorps, they're a team of 6 to 10 people that travel throughout the state and work on trails for up to 3 to 9 months. They generally work 10-hour days in remote locations. Basically all they need is a place to set up a tent and fresh water. They live together for that entire time. They provide hands-on training, but they also provide life skills. And I can't tell you the number of times that I talked with a member when their term was over, and it's amazing the change in the personality and how they expand as an adult when they go through these AmeriCorps programs. So the Arizona Trail Association uses so many, and it's a great program that they're using. And another perk for that program, they get an education award for college when they're done. So that's another thing for the AmeriCorps program. But at times, they have to use motorized equipment. This is Rob Bauer, and if you've seen any, I think Matt can attest to this, if you've seen any of the steel gates along the Arizona Trail, Rob Bauer is the one that constructs all these trails. So this is the person that does a lot of the motorized work on their trail. This is a typical example of a trail project that needs to be done on the Arizona Trail. This is the West Mazatel Trail in the wilderness there, and as you can see, it's all overgrown. So this project was primarily focusing on brushing and tread repair on the 7.6 miles of trails. This was the 2019 project funded with the Arizona Trail Fund and RTP funds. So this was one that was funded this year. It's the Passage 25 trail work on Alder Ridge, 6.7 miles of new trail, 4.6 miles was done by Conservation Corps, and 2.1 mile was done by machine construction. It took the existing trail from a power line road that was used by motorized vehicle to give the user a better understanding of what a scenic trail looks like. This photo was, they couldn't get equipment up there, so they had to hand build a gate for the livestock, to keep the livestock out of there. So they actually did this by hand. So this one's scheduled to be completed this year. It's 14 weeks of Conservation Corps. They're doing work on this trail. So they also had several safety and education projects funded with Arizona State Parks. The first one is Trail Skills Institute. They had a collaboration with American Conservation Experience and Arizona Trail Association to give volunteers and anybody interested training on how to properly build trails, what to look for on trails, and proper maintenance on trails. So this was at 4 different locations throughout the state that was done, and they had over 55 people participate in this. So from this year, they actually created videos that shows you how to build a trail properly and things to look for. So that is on the Arizona Trail website now, and that was funded this year with Safety and Education funds. So the Network for Arizona Trail, that's another safety and education project. They applied for funds. We had a summit in 2020, and we plan to have a summit this year. However, COVID hit right after this was funded, and they established with a bunch of partners this Network of Arizona Trail that meets on monthly. And it was great during COVID because no one knew, there were no best management practices how to deal with users during COVID. So it was a great sounding board where land managers and users could come to try to establish proper protocols with COVID-19. And we still meet monthly, and we hope to have the 2022 Trail Summit. I think we're going to have it virtually, I believe that. That'll be soon. And this one's a picture of the 2021 one, Trail Summit. This was in Cottonwood. This is the first time they did it. Arizona Trail was certainly vital and established along with several other partners. This is a 2-day event. They basically did not have a set agenda, and it was great to get everybody together to discuss motorized and non-motorized to talk about trail issues, trail successes, best management practice, and we're going to have and they're going to have a meeting sometime in 2022. I believe it is in May. We'll certainly let the board know when that is. But anybody interested, you can certainly also join the group on their monthly calls, and I could provide that link too. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on Matt also.
Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Matt. Board member, questions, comments? Board member Buchanan?
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've got 3 questions, and maybe ought to ask them in turn. First one has to do with funding. If we on the state parks provide funding for the Arizona Trail Association, my assumption is, if you're sitting in Matt's seat, you don't want any restrictions on how they spend it. But I imagine that it comes with some restrictions. So I'd like to know a little bit about the left and right limit and how that works from a state parks perspective.
So a lot of the Arizona Trail Fund comes from the legislature, so that's state funding. So they need to have, this needs to be approved by SHPO. So SHPO looks at the cultural surveys before they can do any work on the trail, and they have to say there's no adverse effect, or if there's adverse effect, there might be mitigation measures in place to do those sections of trail. The other funding is federal funding. So that one has to have the complete NEPA analysis and all the cultural reviews in place before they can do that. So that goes to Federal Highway for approval before the funding is approved for the Arizona Trail Association.
So I'm still going to have a question about that then.
Sure.
So is there a restriction? Does federal funding have to be spent on federal land, state funding on state land, or can it apply throughout the trail? That's really what I'm asking.
The funding can be applied throughout the trail, the whole trail system.
All right, great. And then here's the second question. I actually live on the trail on Harshaw Road outside of Patagonia, but I know that there's an alternate route being constructed, and it would provide a better scenic opportunity for those people who are hiking along that section, but then that gets also back to, the option of going into Patagonia to get resupply. So I'm wondering, how is that good? Is the Patagonia route still going to be maintained as one choice?
That'll be a question for Matt, if Matt's more familiar with that than I am.
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Buchanan, and I look forward to meeting you. I spent a lot of time down in the Patagonia area. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with this project, we've been in the works now for 8 years, and we received approval to begin construction in 2020. And even with COVID restrictions in place, we were able to get a conservation corps on the ground to begin constructing that last year. But the idea is that currently the trail gets on the Harshaw Road, which is a paved road that is currently used by a lot of people, including major mining operations just out of the town of Patagonia. After it gets into the town, then it follows 14 miles of dirt roads used by OHVs to get up into the Mount Racing Wilderness. The alternate, which is essentially more in line with National Scenic Trail values, follows the trail just to the east of the road, passes under the highway, and climbs up a beautiful ridgeline to reach on the trail. That project will hopefully be completed within the next 3 years. Fund independent. It's a total of 32 miles of new trail construction with a linked trail in 2 different areas. Some of that is funded by state parks, some of that is funded by federal, and some really private donations. But to answer Bob's question, the alternate for people that want to get into the town of Patagonia is actually along a newly constructed piece of trail called the Train Track Trail that is 4 miles in length, that goes from where the Arizona Trail crosses under Highway 82 to the town of Patagonia. So no people ever have to walk or ride their horse or ride their bike on Harshaw Road. That piece of trail that will essentially be abandoned, which is almost 4 miles in length along the current Arizona Trail route, will likely be maintained by a local volunteer group that is still yet to be identified, probably within the town of Patagonia, so that people will have the option when they're on the trail, either walking along Harshaw Road, which we discourage, or by walking along the Train Track Trail to be able to get into the town of Patagonia. But in talking with folks in Patagonia, which is one of our most important gateway communities, maintaining that connection to the town is incredibly important.
Thanks, Matt. Last question. This is kind of technical and specific, and you may not have the answer, but I'll give you some feedback behind why I'm asking the question. On a lot of the gates that I've been to on the trail, there's a metal grate on one side of it. And I was trying to, on the ground, and I'm trying to understand the purpose of that metal gate. Does that have something to do with control of cattle?
Yeah, so I don't know, Nikki, if you had any photos available to share, but there are essentially 3 styles of gates. I'll start with the third, which is the one that's most common, and we call those wire gates or cowboy gates, which is essentially just wire and stick to be able to use pressure to close the gate. What we found is that people have a hard time opening them, and they have a much harder time closing them than those we could control cattle. So what we've done over the past decade is replace about 100 of those with steel gates. Those meet ADA requirements. They restrict motorized use. They restrict cattle, although you can't get animals through them. And the nice thing about the design is that they allow for fully loaded pack stock. So that is a horse with, satellites on both sides, almost 6 feet wide, to be able to pass through the gate. Recently, what we found is that by adding that, what we call a raised cattle guard, just to the right of the gate, some people call them rollovers, allow people on bicycles and on foot to walk over without opening or closing the gate at all. And so what we were trying to do is avoid redundancy and too many resources on the ground. So some locations have a wire gate and the rollover or the raised cattle guard, whereas others have that bigger kind of steel gate. But we prefer the steel gates when it comes to restriction of a motorized trespass, which is still very common on the trail. So the big steel gates, we call them super gates, are primarily to keep out photos, but also to accommodate all non-motorized trail users. Whereas the rollover or the raised cattle guard is essentially to keep cattle where they're supposed to be, but allow people on bicycle to pass through quickly.
So the feedback is that when you're on horseback, it's really hard to open a gate when there's a cattle guard there. You have to actually dismount a lot of times. So anyway, not a big deal, but when you're an old man, it gets tiresome to get down and up off of the horse many times in a day. Anyway, there you have it.
Thank you, Jeff. That's really good. Any other questions or comments from board members or staff? Mickey, this is outstanding. I don't know if you saw the article in the paper just the other day, but there's a skateboarder who is doing a fundraising campaign to raise money on support of the Arizona Trail. Matt, I don't know if you saw that. It was in the Republic just the other day.
I did, yeah. Springtime is the busiest season, both in terms of publicity and trail use. And so what we're seeing is that normally there would be visitors from around the world that are here on the Arizona Trail this time of year because of international travel restrictions. We're not seeing many international travelers, but people from within state and from throughout the United States. This is a major destination. But again, these high-profile people like Ryan Lay, a pro skateboarder who's hiking the whole trail, they generate a lot of publicity, but they're probably 3% of overall trail users. And 97% are people like you and I who don't have 2 months to go for a long walk, but will go out for a month or for a weekend with friends. But it's an amazing community resource that really only gets better over time. And the one piece that I'll mention about funding that I think might cause some confusion is that when we talk about, especially the Arizona Trail State Fund, which receives that legislature appropriation, that money does not flow to the Arizona Trail Association. I really wish that it did. But the way that the legislation was written is that we help kind of guide and direct that funding from a distance, saying this is where the project is most needed. We'll contract with the Conservation Corps. They pay the Conservation Corps directly. So although we dedicate staff resources and volunteer resources, organizational resources to make sure that these projects happen safely and successfully for the benefit of the trail, our organization actually doesn't see the time on the big funding.
Yeah, it's complicated. I really appreciate that. And also there's some opportunities. I know Jan Hancock, who is really kind of the matriarch of this entire trail development area. There's Rails to Trails and some other federal legislative proposals in the works that might be able to come back and be able to help support financially this as well. So there are no other questions. Matt, thank you so much for your stewardship on all of this. This is really a huge deal. I mean, 800 miles of connectivity from South to North Arizona is no small undertaking, and I think you mentioned this is only one of 11 national scenic trails in the entire 48 states. So that's something that Debbie and AOT and everyone really needs to be able to do it. I wish I could walk the whole 800 miles at some point. I may have to get on the horseback that Jeff's talking about in order to be successful, but what a great tribute, what a great asset, and the jurisdictional. I do have one quick question, and Matt, maybe it's best to you or Mickey. Does a trail also go through tribal lands?
You know, it does not. When the trail was originally designed, the idea was to maximize time on public land with an emphasis on Forest Service, BLM National Park Service, and Indian reservations were intentionally avoided. But we do recognize that most of the trails that people are recreating on are national footpaths, and that all of this is ancestral land. So we as an organization have worked really hard, especially with me and ecology background, having worked with tribes for all of my professional adult life, to be able to do outreach to various tribes throughout Arizona. So we have been engaging ancestral land crews, land acknowledgement on trailhead signs, and trying to engage tribes as much as possible.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's a tremendous connection to our ancestral indigenous people who were here way before us. So thank you very much. Mickey, Matt, thank you. Really appreciate it. Yes, excellent. All right. I know Brittany is here to give us a legislative update on all the wonderful works that's happening over at the state capitol. I don't know how late you're up at night working with the Senate and the like, but thank you for taking a break and coming and telling us where we are on all these wonderful bills.
Okay. Thank you. Well, good morning, Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to be here to speak in person. I haven't seen any of you in person, so it's nice to see some smiling faces. So you guys should have received in the packet a summary of legislation, which I have been sending out every week at the end of the week. And I'm just going to focus your attention on a few bills. And our list has shortened a little bit because some of the bills that we were tracking are not moving through the process and will not move through the process. So I removed a lot of those off of our list. So what I did want to start with was House Bill 2077. Our State Lake Improvement Fund appropriations was a Biasucci bill. And right now, that bill is being held because it does have an appropriation on it. So that bill is being held in the legislature during budget discussions. So right now, there are budget discussions happening between the legislature and the governor's office. So all of the bills that we have been tracking that has an appropriation on it are being held at this time, so they are not moving forward. If you do want a little quick summary, that SLIF bill allows 10%, only 10% of money to be deposited in our SLIF fund to staff support to plan and administer the SLIF. So that's a bill that we have been talking directly with the governor's office about, and we're trying to see how that's going to work. So that one is being held. 2127, Appropriation State Parks Heritage Fund, was an Osborne bill. She's a House representative. And that bill appropriates $10 million from the general fund in FY22 for the State Parks Heritage Fund. This bill is also being held because it has an appropriation on it. And this bill, like I said in the last meeting, is almost the same as Senate Bill 1384, which is on our last page. And that is also a Heritage Fund bill. This is a Senator Schultz bill, and it appropriates $1 million in fiscal year 2022, $2 million in fiscal year 2023, and $3 million in fiscal year 2024, and so on. From the State Lottery Fund to the Arizona State Parks Heritage Fund. This bill did go through the Senate, it passed, and it went through the House. It went through House appropriations, and there was an amendment that was added on this bill, and the amendment delays the appropriation by one fiscal year and adds more money. So $3 million in FY 2023, $4 million in FY 2024, and $5 million in FY 2025, and so on. So this bill is being held also because it has money attached to it, and this is going through budget discussions. What I've been kind of hearing is, I believe that Senator Shope, Representative Osborne have come to kind of an agreement and they're working it out. I personally, I can't say for sure, but I think that the Senate Bill 1384 may have a better chance of moving forward through the negotiation process, where it takes money out of the state lottery fund instead of the general fund. I can't say for sure, like I said, what's going to happen, but that is going through the negotiation process at this time. I will also take your attention to HCR 2034. This was our resolution, Arizona's Outdoors Recreation Supporting. This was a Representative Cobb bill. So there was an HCR 2034 and an SCR, I believe 1024, if I can remember. And the SCR and the HCR both had the exact same language on it, but the SCR is essentially a dead bill. So because it had mirrored language on it, they were able to take one bill and make it into a different bill with a different issue. So HCR 2034 is still moving through the process, and right now it will be moving, but it's held also because of budget discussions. And usually with the budget, legislators focus more on budget, and then after budget is done, they'll push the regular bills through until session is completely over. So I did speak with staff on this, and this bill should be moving through the process. It just hasn't moved yet. Those are really the only bills that I have to point out. I will take any questions, and if you have any concerns or questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Brittany. Questions, comments from board members? Board member Palmer?
Yes, Brittany, I have a question. So they're based on budget appropriation. What's the target date for some of those, that appropriation decisions to be made?
Chairman and Board Member Palmberg, so I can't give a definitive date, but I do know that they are in discussion right now. Usually, I would say... Oh, man. All right. Reverb?
Muted.
That's interesting.
Just
I'll just keep going.
Well, I think there must be a feedback. That was your question, Terry, yeah. Yeah, I think there's
It's just
There's a gap.
feedback. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Brittany.
Okay, I'm sorry. That was a little daunting. But I can say that usually I would say it happens in April, early May. Right now they're in discussion. I would hopefully assume that maybe something will come out possibly next week or the week after. Since I worked at the House for about 5 years, the House of Reps, and usually I would see them happening late April, early May, and then session would be over maybe middle of May, early May, something like that. And usually when budget happens, it's usually a week. So the bills come out, it goes through the committee, Appropriations Committee, and they could take all day, all night. Once that passes, it'll go to the floor to be heard by all of the members, and they'll vote on it, and then they'll vote on other bills, and then session is over. So it usually takes about a week or so for that to happen, and it moves really quickly. So I would say maybe late April, early May.
Very good, thank you.
Any more questions?
Bob, on the SLIF funding, I know that that's one that continues to be in negotiation, and then Brittany, on your write-up, you have allows only 10% of monies to be deposited in SLIF. Is that concern, was it higher than that before it comes to this point?
Yeah, it was a lot higher than that. It was, in fact, right around 75% was used, and that was a result of funds being swept a number of years ago. So ever since Heritage Fund was swept, general funds have been swept. Somewhere around, I don't know, if you want to go back to what I think it was 06, we've had about $50 million swept from the agency, either in permanent loss or redirection of funds. And as a result, at the time, the board made the decision to use SLIF for operating and some capital And so we're using that to pay, programs like state historic preservation, capital improvement projects and things the like. So what they would do is essentially revert that back to a grant, external grant program, restrict only 10% to the administration of those funds, and then backfill the loss of those operational dollars with general fund and a state park revenue fund increase in appropriations. So essentially you'd be whole,
Right,
but we'd be now back on the general fund, and that's concerning for a lot of ways, particularly with the result of past history, not too long ago, that budgets go down, economy goes down, we're always one of the first agencies that gets cut. So that's essentially what it would do, is revert it back to what it was prior to, I think it was 2005 or 2006, as a pass-through grant program, which is what it was intended for.
Board Member Buchanan?
Thanks, Chairman. This is kind of unique. I can raise my hand and you can see me. So just for clarification, this bill also restricts that money allocated to us has to be spent on search and rescue. Is that correct? That's the way I read it here. I don't know.
So, Mr. Chair and Mr. Buchanan, so let me go back to my page here. So some monies in the SLIF have to be, they're adding now, that this money must also be used for water search and rescue operations. So it just adds, there are different items that this monies can be used for, and it just adds water rescue and water search.
Okay, it's additive, not limiting.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, very good, thank you. Brittany, one question in terms of, and maybe this is just my educator hat coming on that bill that apparently the governor is ready to sign right up front, the HB 2058 on the historic names. And as I was reading through that, the interpretation I have is that this bill protects names as they currently are, or that they bear their current name, which I guess means that this bill would prevent any name changes in the future?
Mr. Chair, that is correct from my understanding. I do know that some of these boards and commissions, they were intended to continue in 2020, and because of COVID happening, that bill wasn't able to make it through, so those boards kind of died and they weren't on the books anymore. So they had to bring it back in this session to reestablish those boards. So that's really what this bill is doing, and you're correct, by the way. But this bill is really just reestablishing those boards to be back on the books, and that's correct.
So if we were, for example, with the Yarnell Park, take that over as a state park, for example, will that have to go through I want to get their name correct, the State Board on Geographic and Historic Names in order for such a name to be adopted, or do we as a board have the opportunity to do our own name? I'm just curious what those relationships, I mean, my experience back with Phoenix so many years ago when we took the name of Squaw Peak and changed it to Piestewa Peak was a enormous controversy because of the relationship of not only the state geographical board, but then its relationship on federal mapping with the United States thing. So I'm just curious if this muddies that up further, or is it clear that we still have the opportunity to name accordingly?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we do still have the opportunity to change those names as we please. I do know with, I believe the historic names, I can't remember which one, but they do work with SHPO, and SHPO works close with them in a capacity. I'm not really exactly sure, but that's really why I was watching this one. But you're correct. We will be able to the board will be able to change names as they come.
All right. Good to know. I mean, this is so tension and controversial in a sense.
Yes.
The only other thing I guess I would have a question is, since the two legislators have seemingly come together on the Heritage Fund, that $10 million, and whether it's going to be spread out over years, if it ends up being financed through the lottery fund, the way it was before, it was eliminated back, how many years ago, Tim?
10.
I think it's 2010.
10 years
2010.
ago? It's still, however, vulnerable, right? I mean, those funds, because they're lottery funds, could be swept just like they were right back when, rather than a general appropriation, which would come in and you'd get the $10 million, correct?
Mr. Chair, members, that is correct. Like I said, I don't know for sure what will happen, if there will be general fund monies or lottery fund monies, but it looks like that they may go the lottery fund route. We really just have to see when the budget hits. But yes, you're correct. Most of the money, I know there is a game and fish fund and all of that money has to be allocated first to those funds before it even comes to the Heritage Park.
I see.
So that money has to be allocated first, and then that money will be allocated to Heritage Fund. So there's still a little bit of discrepancy.
Well, fingers crossed. I know you've been 10 years without anything, but just the idea that there might be some funds, I would almost prefer the general appropriation, but it doesn't sound like that's the way it's going, so.
And Chairman, I know, like you said, a lot of members like the general appropriation, but just with COVID and with things that happened in the past, I'm just not sure. Also, I did want to bring up, while I'm up here, that we do have a missing board member, just a vacant board seat, and I just wanted to bring up that if you have anyone who's interested in being on the board, please let me know. I know the director spoke last month about our audit coming up, and I think if we had someone who was filled in on the board, or at least someone that was interested, that would be good for our audit. So if you have anyone, please let me know. I can just read you from ARS 41511 that the appointed member shall be selected because of their knowledge and interest in outdoor activities, multiple use of lands, archaeology, natural resources, and the value of the historical aspects of Arizona, and because of their interest in the conservation of natural resources. One appointed member shall be representative of livestock, one member shall be professionally engaged in recreation work, and an appointed member shall be professionally engaged in tourism. So I just wanted to bring that up. If you have anyone who's interested, please let me know and I can help.
Thank you. I know Board Member Buchanan has forwarded a name of in the livestock area for that, and so if there are any other suggestions, that would be good to know. Yeah, we'd like to have that missing board member.
For sure.
If possible. That's good. Any questions? Brittany, great job. This really is very understandable. Good luck down there, Brittany.
Thank you. And
wish you well.
Please, Chairman and members, if you have any questions or if it's not clear, let me know and I will answer questions or make the document clearer to understand.
Well, you've been great. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks.
Now let's go on to agenda item E, future. Are there any items board members would like to suggest for the future meetings? Obviously, the next one coming up is in May. I know that I think Mickey has some trail stuff coming up and some other action items, if I remember right, Bob, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
All right, let's go then. If nothing else, current events. Board members may present a summary of any events or recent experiences that they've had other than Board Member Buchanan getting up and down his horse as he's going through on trail. So are there any other experiences? All right, hearing none. Agency updates. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members. Just a couple updates. This is a new item. I think the chair's request is you guys get to talk about current events, but I don't. So you may regret adding this as an agenda item, and you can remove it at any time. But I think it's just a way for us to talk about what's going on in the agency outside of your normal agenda items, so we can get into as much specifics as you want, but some of the things that are going on with the agency. And of course, one of them is the recent decision for the governor's office, along with DOA and us, is to move this facility downtown. So for a couple months prior, with COVID, a lot of teleworking has been going on. There's essentially several state buildings that are rendered essentially vacant, where you have agencies like DES that are just about 90% are working from home. And so those spaces, we lease this. This is a private held lease that we've been leasing on a 5-year term. Well, that is coming up. I wish we could approve that lease, but we can't. DOA does. And so what they did, and we're not the only agency they're looking at either, but they're looking at, for us, what our space needs are. Could we be shoehorned into some vacant space that's downtown? And we went through the analysis. We talked about what we're paying here, what our needs are here, what our storage space is here, as well as our board meetings, and do we have that kind of capacity downtown? So fast forwarding a month or two with the heavy work of Tim, of course, and Mark Weiss, who, there he is, he's over here, he's kind of our point on it now. He's done this a time or two, is that they're going to move us. A decision was made by the governor's office to move us to the 1110 West Washington building, which is, for those of you who've been around state government, it's the DEQ building. It's that really nice one right behind where SHPO is, in that little house right there in the front downtown. The timeline on that is August sometime. So we're going to try to see where we are with our board meeting, where that's going to fall, if we're going to be in by then or not. But you could imagine with a move, I mean, we're a relatively small agency, but it's logistics is what we're really just starting right now. We do know where we're going to be. We're going to be on the first floor. So we had to bump another agency out, which was DFFM. They are moving, I think, up a floor or two, which was really good because I think it allows us to have the opportunity to provide retail, selling parks passes, reservations, those types of things. And our customers won't have to go through metal detectors to go up to a floor. So we've worked on that. We've got storage space and a whole bunch of other things. So this move only affects the folks that are in this office. The other side of this is we're going to continue with a very strong teleworking workforce. So it's not going to be going back to a 5-day-a-week commute downtown, which many of you have done that. It's not very pleasant at all. But we're going to continue doing that. I think we've got about 50-some spaces here. Either it's an office or a cubicle. We're only planning for right around 30 downtown. And of that 30 is really going to be a sort of a hoteling type of an atmosphere, not an office. So you can grab your laptop, come and go, all those things. So those are the things that we're working out. The other is the move financially needed to make sense. Go from here to go pay more downtown, that really didn't make sense. So we worked with DOA as well as the governor's office. As we move in August, they're going to give us the rest of the year free. So we're going to be living rent-free down there, among other things. So we're about $250,000. This is going to save the agency the first year alone. And then then the rate's going to go to what we're paying now. So it's not going to cost us any more. And other things like that we're working on, but the logistics side, physically moving people, but then there's the other side that we're making sure this is culture. This is, folks love this office, and we're moving them downtown. I've been through 2 moves in my career, and it comes down to hearing and listening and responding and acting on the concerns of our staff. What does this mean? We're moving. It's change. And we're not going to gloss over that. We're going to take it very, very seriously. We've actually already set up meetings and avenues of communication that we can hear concerns and we can get on them right away. And in fact, we've had a couple concerns that, boy, we didn't even think about that. So it's getting into the planning process. So that's something we get to look forward to over the summer to button everything up here and move on out and hopefully be in there sometime in August. So we'll keep you guys updated as the move goes and how it's going. But we do know that there are spaces down there to have board meetings. So Member Buchanan won't have to drive near as far. It'll cut off his commute at least.
Go ahead, Jeff. So, thanks. Mr. Chairman. So just something to think about, and I'm not sure if it would be better or worse, but I know we want to get back to opportunities to meet at various parks.
Yep.
As you look at July, August, September, it's worth thinking about maybe using that as a target for going elsewhere, if it would be less disruptive to the agency, to the organization. That's really the
Yeah,
question.
that's a great point. And that's something that we talked about is, well, if we're kind of on the fence in August, why rush to fit it in? Why don't we? And we've talked about this over the last year until COVID, was actually getting out into the communities, having meetings like in Havasu, in Tucson and others. So that's definitely something that we can plan on.
Great, okay. Terry?
I've attended a lot of things at those buildings down there along Washington, and one of the concerns I would voice is if we're going to expect public to drop in for 15, 20 minutes to pick up maps, and if we could get some designated parking.
Yep.
Parking is a huge issue, huge.
Yeah, that was one of our concerns. One of our main concerns, actually, probably number one, was our customers. We were relying on our customers and access. And the Department of Administration heard us, and they are actually going to work on that, where you have designated space, not just for those that are in their car, but we see people pulling RVs, trailers, fishing boats, those types of things. So they're working with us on actually a designated space just for our parks customers to make it a little bit easier.
And then the other thing is, there's nice signage out on the freeway state parks. Are we going to be able to have ADOT work with us and do something to do that downtown?
That's exactly right.
Cool.
But this, for our customers, this is going to be a full-blown website, social media, physical signage, not just taking that one down, but making sure our customers know where to go is absolutely key.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Anything else, Bob?
The second one is just a quick update for, as you know, the governor worked with us and provided free day use access over Easter weekend. We couldn't use 2020 because COVID had hit and we were essentially in a lockdown, I think, at that time last year. The numbers are staggering that we saw. And this is just day use. We saw a 103% increase over 2019 for parks visitation day use. So this doesn't count camping and those types of those are reservation based. 103%. This is strong. I was on a call yesterday. Tim and I both, we're on an interagency federal state call with Forest Service, BLM, et cetera. BLM's director joined on too. They're seeing the same thing. Forest Service is seeing the same thing. Outdoor recreation is strong. In fact, it's stronger than it's ever been that we know or we've documented. Visitation. So just to let you know, now is it probably related to day use maybe, we've been seeing a steady increase in outdoor recreation certainly during COVID, but we're still continuing to see it. And 103% is a lot. It's great revenue. Now, it's also adding a lot of stress on the parks. I think Tombstone was the Tombstone Courthouse, we had about 1,200 people go through that place in a weekend.
Wow.
And they're usually in the hundreds, 200 to 300-ish. So all parks across the board are going up. Something that next month, we're going to talk to you guys about strategic planning, strategic visioning, those types of things. So we're going to add a couple hours onto the agenda to get your thoughts. This is certainly one of them. When we're talking about demand is very, very high. We're seeing it across the state. What is this going to mean for parks and how can we be best positioned? So I thought you'd enjoy those numbers, Chair and members, that we saw. And I don't see them slowing down at all. Unless the weather gets really hot, then we'll probably see those tail off. But that's just remarkable numbers in a year.
No, and I think everyone has, with the COVID relationship and nature being the great healer, that is great. I mean, that's wonderful for all these numbers to come. But then on the operational side, that other side is how then do you not only maintain your ability to manage those facilities at a time. But as we know with the national parks particularly, it's the backlog, and that you're never able to catch up because you never have an opportunity to take a step back and then be able to do all these things. So I think strategically, it's important for this board and others like us that are involved in outdoor management, outdoor parks and the like, to be able to be very ambitious and aggressive in our ways of how do you manage that? Because it's not my generation that I'm worried about. We were talking about grandchildren with the Yarnell group. It is our children and our grandchildren and the effects of environmental impacts and climate change and all of the others. Our numbers of population are just getting more. Arizona continues to be this gateway of more and more people coming to the state. So, yeah, I think strategically we need to really do that. And where our board can be of support and help for you, we certainly want to.
We would love that, because the other factor is quality of the experience. Some folks, you could take Slide Rock for an example. We've been closing down every day for a year just because of the demand, and you all have seen that. Well, we still get a few complaints about the quality of that experience. Well, it's pretty popular. People can't park along the road anymore, but if you want isolation and be by yourself, well, it's not going to happen at that park.
And I think to your point, the day usage, that's what people want to have, that experience, have it, and then be able to go back home again. And that's where parking becomes a huge issue and the like.
It's a nightmare.
Anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry. Board member
Question.
Palmer?
Agency update maybe next month about the cabin usage. I know you guys are exploring that, and maybe you'll be at a point you can give us an update.
We will. We're actually going to put that as an agenda item. What we're working on with that, Terry, is the numbers to come in as well. I won't bore you, but I'm sure Kevin will go through this next month, but talk to you about it as we wrap up the year where we are. COVID had a little bit of an impact on that because the cabins were shut down essentially for a while. But we have that, and we're going to try to time it with end of fiscal year, so that will give you at least some perspective on where we are. So we haven't forgotten about that.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item 8, call to the public. I'll recognize anyone wishing to address the board. Anyone? Hearing none. Item I, future meeting dates, and as Board Member Buchanan said, it'll be our hope that we will be able to take our board meetings to at least some extent on the road on these future ones, but the next meeting is scheduled for May 20th, and then of course, as our good friends from Yarnell mentioned, we'll have the June 17th meeting, and then the June 30 dedication event up at Yarnell at that area. July, unless there's business, and of course with the legislature and the budget, there's always an opportunity that we might have to have a special meeting, but up until that point, we don't expect to have a meeting in July, correct? All right. And then August, I guess we'll guess where we're going to be at that point. So we do have a item on the agenda to go into executive session. I would like for one of our board members to move for us to go into executive session to hear advice from our legal representatives.
Yeah, do you want to go?
Mr. Chairman, I move to enter executive session for the purpose of receiving legal advice and to instruct legal counsel on Render versus Brnovich et al.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second on the floor to move into executive session. Any questions or concerns? Nancy, do I need a roll call vote for that? Or can I just do?
Aye.
All right. All those in favor of going into executive session, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none, the board will now go into executive session. For the rest of the public, this is a private meeting. We will come back to the regular board meeting after executive session is over. Arizona State Parks Board back to order. We have agenda item J, and I would like to have a motion regarding the follow-up to our recently held executive session.
Mr. Chair, Terry Palmberg, I move to enter, no,
Wrong one. Here, Mike. Got it? Just a minute. Oh, okay. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, my apologies. I move to direct the Attorney Generals to proceed as instructed and discussed in the executive session on the matter of Render versus Brokovich, CV 2019-00068.
Is there a second to the motion?
Mr. Chair, Jeff Buchanan, I second.
The motion has been made and seconded regarding the movement to have the Attorney General's office proceed as instructed in the executive session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, a roll call vote, please.
Jill Larson,
Aye.
Tom Sefton,
Aye.
Lisa Atkins, Jeff Buchanan,
Aye.
Debbie Johnson, Terry Palmberg.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will call the meeting complete. Thank you. Yes.